So I would now like to invite Professor Sanjeeva Srivastava, who is a cancer proteomics expert and currently at IIT Bombay. He has previously done his postdoc at Harvard Medical Center in USA, and he's a renowned proteomics expert with relation to novel markers in cancer. So,
all right. Thank you, organizers, for the invitation and for the introduction. Let me share my slides. Very good evening, everyone, and thanks, organizer, for the invitation, Dr. Diwakar, for this opportunity to speak to all of you. It was really nice to hear Dr. Bist, and she already emphasized the need of using proteomics in the infectious diseases. I'm just presenting some of the recent work which we have done on the COVID-19. I'd like to just mention that, in the COVID-19, when we started seeing last year, various technologies started contributing. And of course, we did realize the potential of these omics technologies, how quickly they can provide so much information for the unknown enemy what we had. Started with next generation sequencing, which led to the very specific test of RT-PCR, lot of cryo-electron microscopy work, mass spectrometry work, which really identified the right epitopes, and then a lot of vaccine development. All of them were really contributed and gained knowledge immensely using omics technologies. So we had collaboration from Kasturba Hospital and Nair Hospital in Mumbai, and we were already working with these clinicians on different other infectious diseases in the past. So when the patients are coming here for their routine swab sample, our idea was, can we take the same leftover sample that is not being used for the RT-PCR, and then try to use that to see whether using mass spectrometers can we detect these viral peptide and try to develop some new tests which was not possible earlier. So based on this, first of all, we had to think about several safety considerations, especially what can be safe way of sample preparation so that there is no viral threat in that, and then how best we can inactivate the virus quickly. So unlike our routine workflow which we do in the lab for the other diseases, here we have to also be challenged with it has to be quick, it has to be safe, it can also be field deployable. So those things were being considered, and we tried many ways of protein extraction from these nasopharyngeal swab sample. Given the challenge that these are the VTM based media which contains these swab samples, so we had to also consider that, and so we tried many different extraction methods, including with ethanol, isopropanol, acetone, and TC acetone, urea lysis. Several methods we tried, and then after extracting the protein, then we tried to do the digestion, and then we ran them in orbitrary fusion, LCM, SMS. Now these are the human respiratory samples, like you are getting from the nasal swab. So one would expect a lot of proteins over there, even from the host side. So we had both host proteins as well as the viral protein, which will be very low abundant. So we did search different databases of the same proteome data, and got at least around 1,000 or so protein from the human side, host side. We got few propeptides of SARS-CoV-2 virus, and also we looked into other pathogen-based database as well. Based on these considerations, then our focus was first immediately to look into specifically the viral peptides, and then try to develop the mass spectrometry-based triple quadrupole based test known as targeted proteomics to specifically selectively look at these viral peptides using SRM assays, known as selected reaction monitoring assays. So here, as I said, we had great challenges and difficulty of thinking about how to get best viral peptides from these nasopharyngeal swab sample. And acetone gave the maximum number of unique peptides of virus. So good thing was that we were not knowing that how best we can get the output from this project, but we did see a lot of viral peptides. So that was a good thing to start with, because unlike RNA and the real-time PCR work, where you can amplify the things, here you are only relying on what is present in the sample. So as many peptides or proteins are there, only those you can identify. But so we could, from different extraction method, we can see different peptides, and then we thought to pool also, so that we can have the maximum enrichment from every patient samples to look into these type of viral peptides. So based on these are some of the peptide I'm just showing here. So the workflow then revolved around developing the specific targeted assay, because now from the global discovery work, we know that we can see viral peptides, but how to quickly develop a test which can be utilized to look into using mass spectrometers. So that's where this workflow we followed, that after protein pellet precipitation, the urea lysyl buffer was added, trypsin digestion happened, then desalting, and then those samples were run in the triple quadrupole mass spec. So now from the global data, we know that these are the various peptides from the nucleoprotein or glycoprotein or replicase. They are coming from these samples, and in the mass spec also it's important to know that which peptides can ionize well, which you are able to identify easily. So these are various considerations we had, and of course this data shows that we could see very huge peaks of these peptides, especially the spike glycoproteins. And considering these, we took actually 11 peptides just to be on the safe side, because here we're talking about somebody COVID positive or negative, that kind of detection, a new mass spec based test. So here consideration was to take 11 peptides belonging to 3 different proteins of SARS-CoV-2, the spike protein, nucleoprotein, and replicase, and 4 peptides, 3 peptides, and 4 peptides of each of these 3 proteins in a 10-minute solution profile, so that even if we see at least 4 or 5 peptides from any given patient, then that is good enough confidence to say it is positive. This was slightly longer gradient considering what we can do with the triple quad mass spec. We can easily go even 3 or 4 minutes to do that. But our focus was more into not only be very rapid, but also to be more accurate. And therefore, this test was quite robust, and we are very confidently able to detect mass spectrometry based approach to detect the SARS-CoV-2 peptides. So of course, this is one of the alternate ways of detecting the virus, especially in the times now in the second phase, second wave, when we are seeing even RT-PCR many times are not giving the accurate results. These kind of approaches could be more powerful, because now what we are looking at the peptide sequences, we are not just relying on any specific primers, which is if there is a mutation, you will not see the results. So mass spec could definitely offer sort of new opportunities, especially our optimized methodology was very simple, which can be done in any hospital settings. And we overcome many of the sample storage issues and all using these rapid precipitation methods. And of course, it was very much sensitive. In fact, even in several of the recovered patients who were already negative from the real-time PCR, even over there, we could see still trace of the viral peptides, which is carrying an Eastern infection not gone completely. But the challenge remains, if you want to be competitive in this particular space, the cost of the assays and the number of instruments availability, how many mass spec we can have in those settings, all of those were really challenged. So the work was patented and also published, and this just definitely opens up new opportunities, especially to those institutions, those R&D centers where there are mass spec, that mass spec could be employed. And by now, I think there are several labs from the India as well as abroad have already shown that mass spec can be a good substitute of doing these kind of diagnostic assays. So while we're looking at the nasopharyngeal swab sample, as I mentioned that in the mass spec, when you get all the peptide chromatograms, you can now search those again in different databases. So first thing was to develop the peptide assay from the viral. But after that, we thought, why not we also look at the rest of the data set, which is from the human side, host response. So here, to look at the host response, we tried both nasopharyngeal swab sample, which we already had prepared. And additionally, from the same patients, we also had the plasma sample, which we thought also to analyze the plasma proteome. And both of these are going to give us some idea for the, in response to the infection of SARS-CoV-2, what kind of proteins and pathways they being modulated in the host. So these are the workflows. Like for the plasma proteome, you have to first deplete the abundant proteins, IgG, albumin, etc. Check those quality of the gel, and then you can proceed for the digestion, and those samples can be prepared. And likewise, top sample also being digested. Then the workflow remains same to digest, desalt, and perform the shotgun proteomics to obtain the proteome profile of each of the samples. Every sample ran 2 hours or so, and gave quite decent proteome coverage of around 500 proteins in case of plasma. And what I'm talking, the unique protein after very stringent filtering criteria of 1% FDR and stringent 7 or 8 amino acid long peptide sequences. So these are the gold standard in the mass spec analysis. So when we look at these, now we are talking about host response, host peptides, and looking at host data. What came very interesting and surprising that the true negative, like which are RT-PCR negative, these are these individuals, and the red ones are the individuals who are RT-PCR positive, and the purple ones are the individuals who are RT-PCR negative, and they were actually recovered, but they came very close to the category of positive here. So it means many of these individuals had not recovered well, and still, they need more time for improvement. So this kind of stuff gave us idea that okay, at least it looks like the nasopharyngeal swab sample is giving us some clues regarding the host response and what is the effect of virus. So what kind of those proteins are? That was our next question to be addressed. And additionally, as I mentioned, we are also looking at the plasma sample, which can also indicate us the patient host response and how the disease is getting progress and severe response. So the workflows, I'll skip this part, but looking at different proteins which were quite large data set, I'm just coming to the final information from these data set. We thought, can we take the panel of these proteins, which is most differentiating from the first COVID-19 negative versus positive, and then also within COVID positive, which are the non-severe or the mild cases versus severe group of patients. And several proteins, including few which are listed here, including angiotensinogen protein and S100A8 protein, apolipo-B protein looked quite promising. Serpin family protein, several of those came. They showed quite much difference in the non-severe and severe group of patients. And looking at the proteomics data of several proteins, we also did independent validation where apolipo-B and fibrinogen gamma chain, these proteins actually stood out to be quite good from the overall sensitivity point of view. And then we try to develop some tests based on the mass spectrometer, triple quadrupole based mass spec based test, which is known as targeted proteomics based test. So here we were also able to see certain clinically relevant protein which were also being used in the clinics now by the doctors who are trying to assess the patient's response of from the negative versus positive, or looking at the non-severe and severe. And several clinical markers like C-reactive protein, lactodehydrogenase, interleukin 6, some of these proteins also being seen very easily in our mass spec assay. So here the major power is that rather than measuring every single protein or every single test with ELISA or other kind of test, each time here with with a single same sample, you are able to monitor a large number of peptides and proteins. So your test could actually include some of the known clinical markers as well as some of the protein which we have only identified exclusively from the proteomics workflows. So this is the plasma data, which actually gave us much more clearer picture and very huge difference in the in the blood samples of the non-severe and severe patients like angiotensinogen protein, apolipo-B protein, fibrinogen gamma chain, serpin family proteins. So this is just which we developed for the MRM assay, and that was quite remarkable because so far in the single test with the multiplexing capability, this is a very powerful way to screen that a patient is progressing from the mild to the severe form of the disease. And of course, these are only a few protein I'm showing here. There are several other proteins which we have also worked on. And that actually led us to see can we now take this study forward with a longitudinal samples, because these are one time point sample. Some individuals are either non-severe and some are severe. So now next thing is which we are doing is taking the longitudinal patients and different time points and trying to see the progression of the disease with these markers. These targets also gave us a lot of idea for the disease mechanism and how disease is progressing in these individuals. I'll not go in detail, but neutrophil degradation pathway from the swab sample came highly perturbed. A lot of proteins actually showed deregulation in this pathway, and several proteins belonging to translation machinery, even they showed a lot of change. And those were quite well into connect with the literature which is coming that time, showing that how important the ribosomal mRNA channel is for the NSP1 binding. And also neutrophil degradation came as one of the common pathway which we see in several publications which came almost same time. So even swab sample from the human can actually indicate that disease is progressing, and that was very interesting to see. Additionally, from the plasma sample, we could see few pathways which are abundant, like complement activation and regulation of epithelial activity, but also leukocyte activation pathway came as one of the very interesting pathway. Myeloid cell, how they are able to discriminate the severe and mild COVID-19. So we are now further investigating some of these candidates into longitudinal samples and trying to understand that what triggers the, suddenly all of a sudden the response making people from mild to the severe form of disease. While we are doing all this work, many of the protein we identified from the host response, idea was, can we take some of those targets and use some of the, FDA approved drugs, make libraries of those and do some of the in silico ways of trying to look for, are there potential drug candidates which can bind to these proteins. So I'm just showing this part of the work is very preliminary, and I'm just showing you very brief results of this. But idea is that, several of the host response protein which are showing very high upregulation in the response to COVID-19 moving from mild to severe form of disease, are there some drug inhibitor which can bind and try to control that response? So the drug shown here is, loratadine or UCPH101. They definitely showed binding against several targets, which is shown here, like ADP ribosylation factor, carbonic anhydrase, MIF. Additionally, another drug, which is selenoxir, it showed binding against almost 6 proteins, which were all involved in the severity response, different serpin proteins, S100 proteins. So these are definitely some of the interesting candidate towards taking forward for the drug repurposing aspect. Of course, a lot of further experimental validation has to happen on these potential new candidates before we can see usage of them. But idea was, because we are seeing these host response in the disease progression, can we look into the already FDA approved drugs and try to utilize that information to come up with a potential drug repurposing list, which can be validated by people who are already having BSL-3 facilities and do some of the experimental validation in the cell lines. So just, to conclude, these are some of the papers from the viral detection test which we developed with the Cell Precise Science journal, the plasma work in the frontiers in physiology, and we also did some metabolome work which is currently in review. The 3 patents have been filed looking at these leads and novel tests. So just to summarize, I think we have tried to use power of proteomics and try to come up with a new peptide-based multiple electron monitoring assay from the swab sample. We also were able to look at the plasma sample and came up with the new ways of MRM assay to look for disease severity prognosis from mild to severe form. We have identified some very interesting novel pathways, which is, of course, more to be explored, but really indicates that how disease severity progression is perturbing the host response and host pathways. And some of these leads can be taken forward, which is work in progress and preliminary data shown towards the drug candidates and repurposing. Last month, I was invited by Nature to give a talk, a Nature webinar for describing some of these findings and results what we published from India. I'd like to acknowledge SERB, DST. We were fortunate to be the first of the, winning the grants from DST to initiate this work. IIT Bombay gave the seed funds. We also now, over the time, we have procured another project from Indo-US Science Technology Forum, Indo-US project, to develop some of the multiplexing test for the SARS-CoV-2 along with other pathogens. And DBT sanctioned a project looking at the longitudinal profile of these patient samples. So thanks to all the funding agencies and, of course, the big team to acknowledge, which I cannot name due to the shortage of time. I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Jayanti Shastri, Dr. Sachi. These are from clinicians from Kasturba Nair Hospital. Dr. Om Shrivastava, he's from Jaslok Hospital. Professor Sebnis from IIT Bombay and Dr. Michelle Hill from Australia. Thank you, everybody, for listening this lecture. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Shrivastava, and really it is working with the real COVID patients and real ground level data. So I have one question that did you compare this marker variation between the new mutant strain versus the old strain, or you just restricted yourself to severity?
I totally acknowledge and appreciate your question, and this is what exactly we are doing right now. We are collecting the samples of the second wave patients and trying to compare Is the host response differing anything right now within the second wave with the mutation? Or what kind of mutant peptides are being produced in these individuals? So we're really investigating that. That is too preliminary actually to talk right now, so that's why I have not added that data.
Thank you so much, Professor Srivastava, for this answer. Please, anybody else wants to ask any question? And if you are taking time, please post your questions in event chat. All right. So let me conclude this session. Second session of today's meeting, and I think it has been a really interesting talk from so many people with different strategy, working with different infectious diseases as well as basic diseases, so that we have a arsenal of so a lot of COVID researchers collaborate with people working with different diseases to develop new tools and new ways to combat this pandemic. So all in all, this session has been really very diverse, and a lot of thrust on proteomics and protein therapeutics. So I will welcome my next chair group to take over and execute session number 3. Thank you.
So that was a very wonderful session from all the invited speakers we have for today, day 1. And now we are moving towards the competition and oral presentation category. That is for the best innovative research award category. We have the name I'm just saying so that everyone will prepare with their presentation. Dr. Parul Johri, Dr. Chandra Prakash Prasad, Dr. Ajit Joshi, Dr. Luk Bahadur Chetri, Dr. Suhas, Dr. Raj Pratap Kshatriya, and Dr. Vivek Sharma. So all of you, please be ready with your presentation. You will get 5 minutes for the presentation and 2 minutes for your question and answer session. So be restricted with the time. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Dilip Tiwari, sir.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Parul, you can start your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. A very good evening.
Okay.
Okay, may I please start?
Yes, ma'am, you can start.
Thank you so much, sir. Very good evening to everyone over here. And before I start, I just wanted to give a big applause to Sanjeev, sir. I was just going through the presentation, what sir was speaking, and it was commendable, sir. I'll definitely go through the publications, what you have made personally, just to have an insight actually what was being done, sir. So just starting with my concept, because the category was the innovation thing, so I thought to work on something that has not yet been done. So what I have done, despite of just reading out my slides, I'll just go through the work. What we have done is we have actually analyzed the protein sequences at their atomic level. Till now, whatever bioinformatics tools are there, whether it is sequence alignment tools or BLAST is there or ClustalW is there, what they are doing is they are basically comparing an amino acid of one sequence with the amino acid of the other sequence. What we currently are working on is we are going one step down and we are converting the amino acids into their atomic content, because when we study the structure of amino acid, all the amino acids are being made up of only 5 atoms. These are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. And we are focusing on carbon is because carbon is the main element which is providing the hydrophobicity or the hydrophilicity property to a particular protein, which actually in turn leads to the functionality of the protein. So what we actually do is we have developed an algorithm wherein the massive sequences of proteins are being converted into their atomic content, and we calculate the carbon percentage by sliding the window, and the window size is being taken as the 10% of the total length of the atomic array of the protein sequence. Then we actually find out the carbon percentage, we calculate the frequency, and finally we plot the graph of carbon versus the frequency. This is just an example to show you how the graph is being seen when it is being plotted for the frequency with the carbon percentage. And finally, we calculate all the carbon percentages. in this current work, we are doing this type of work in many type of proteins, in virulent proteins, in studying the glycosylation of the proteins. We are doing it in many, in just identifying the secondary structure prediction tools. We have developed a consensus algorithm that is based on secondary carbon content analysis. So we are doing this type of analysis in many aspects, but herein in this case, what we have done is we have taken the spike protein of the spike glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2, the spike protein of batch coronavirus, the spike protein of MERS 2012 strain, the spike protein of SARS corona urbani strain, and the spike protein of SARS corona TOR2 2003 strain. And we have identified the overall total carbon percentage of all these spike proteins and did a little bit analysis. This is what we get at the end of the analysis. The spike proteins of SARS-CoV-2 was ranging, all the proteins carbon content was ranging from 32.2% to 32.1%. The spike protein of batch coronavirus was having 32% of carbon. Spike protein of MERS was having 32.3% of carbon. The SARS corona urbani strain was having 32.2%. Spike protein of SARS strain was having 32.3%. So overall, what we concluded when we calculated the carbon percentage, that the nature is trying to conserve the carbon, whatever may be the sequence, whatever may be the sequence of the amino acid. Despite of that, nature is trying to put a very close bracket as far as the atomic percentage is being concerned. So this type of analysis we have seen in the secondary structure prediction of the proteins also. We have seen in the N-linked and O-linked glycosylated proteins also that there is a very close bracket of carbon percentage when a protein goes for an N-linked glycosylation or when a protein goes for an O-linked glycosylation. So this type of work we are actually doing, and we have done this time on this spike protein of the coronavirus. So finally, the conclusion of this very small work was that nature is trying to fix the overall carbon content in the proteins. The range of the carbon content could be used to classify the proteins. The virulence of the protein is also associated with the carbon percentage. So because when we did the same type of analysis on the other type of proteins, this the spike protein carbon percentage was from ranging near about 32%, and other proteins were having their percentage as 29%, 29.9%, 29.2%. So this, what we concluded was that because we see that spike protein is one of the virulent protein, so virulency of the protein is somehow associated with the carbon content. And we can even go for carbon-based barcoding. Some of the future aspects, future work which could be done on this carbon atom analysis of proteins is that we can analyze the protein sequences that was not yet answered. We can identify the areas of molecular biology, pharmacy, and drug designing also on the basis of carbon content. The carbon level analysis of the protein sites for post-translation modification. That means the site where the PTM is actually going to happen. What is the actual carbon content of that particular site? And we can demark, yes, if this much is the carbon content of the site, a PTM is tend to happen over there. Then carbon percentage of protein sequence would be the next parameter for protein secondary structure prediction. Therein we have already developed a consensus-based algorithm which is giving a efficiency, a correct answer to the efficiency of the algorithm is 71.2%. Then we can even study the chromatography technique or the microarray technique based on carbon only. We can develop the tools for prediction of ligand binding sites in globular protein with the help of carbon content. And finally, a new fascinating concept of carbon-based barcoding could also be done for the proteins, which could actually classify the carbon on, actually classify proteins on the carbon percent.
Yes, Ms. Parul, that should be enough. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Prakash Prasad, I think someone has unmuted.
So,
Arpit,
can you see the slide?
Yeah, we can see. You are visible.
Okay,
your slide is visible, sir.
So should I start?
Yes, you can.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So the title of my presentation is Natural Compounds for the Therapeutic Management of Lung Cancer. Now, lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related death in the world. And if you look at Globocam data of 2018, it affected 2.1 million persons and accounted for 18.4 cancer-related deaths. In India, it is one of the topmost cancer with 5.9% of all cancer and 18.4% of all cancer-related deaths. So if you look at the risk factor, we all know that smoking is the risk factor, but the other risk factors are exposure to ionizing radiation, asbestos, air pollution. If you look at the etiology of the lung cancer, we know smoking is the major reason, apart from ionizing radiation, asbestos, air pollution, and around 14%, 7 to 14% of lung cancers are due to hereditary also. So we have compiled the environmental and occupational determinant of lung cancer recently in Translational Lung Cancer Research. If you look at types of lung cancer, majorly there are two types. First is non-small cell lung cancer, which accounts for 80 to 90% of lung cancers, and then 10 to 15 are small cell lung cancer. So patients that are diagnosed with NSCLC, that is non-small cell lung cancer, they are normally diagnosed at the advanced stage, and there is only systematic therapy that remains as a treatment modality. So these patients are given platinum-based chemotherapy, but chemotherapy-based regimens appear to have reached a therapeutic plateau, and we need new treatment options. Now, lung cancer has the lowest survival, 5 years survival, as compared to if you look at prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. So we need effective treatment strategy. And there comes the natural compounds, because they target the various factors that can circumvent tumor growth by affecting itself tumor cells or tumor microenvironments or immune modulators or the gut microbiota. So now I will discuss few plant products like allicin. Allicin is an organosulfur compound which comes from garlic. It has been shown that allicin inhibits the growth of NSCLC cell lines A5279 by inducing moderate apoptosis. It has been shown that the combined effect, the allicin can actually sensitize 5-fluorouracil, which is a chemotherapy drug, if they are given in combination as compared to single agent. Allicin has also been shown to inhibit the lung cancer cells in normoxin and hypoxic condition, and they have been shown to sensitize the cisplatin resistant cells by inducing more apoptosis in these cells. Now, the other compound that is really playing a very important role in lung cancer chemoprevention is berberin, which comes from several herbs like Mohania aquifolium. So berberin has been shown to inhibit the cell proliferation in NSCLC cell models, and it has almost no negligible effect on normal human bronchial epithelial cells. It has been shown to inhibit the mouse models of NSCLCs like A549, which is P53 dependent, and H1299, which is a mutant P53, and both the cell lines respond to berberin really well in vivo. We all know that PD-L1, which is a barrier in immunotherapy, as it inhibits the kills tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes. So berberin inhibits the PD-L1 expression in various NSCLC cell lines, and it has been shown that if we treat berberin in vivo xenograft model, the tumor regresses really fast, and the PD-L1 and Ki67 expression goes down in these xenografts. And berberin derivatives are now available, which are more effective in controlling the growth of non-small cell lung cancers. The other compound that can be used in lung cancer treatment can be curcumin, and a lot of data has been there on curcumin, and it shows that curcumin inhibits the proliferation and metastasis of the lung cancer cells and animal models, mainly by inducing the apoptosis, whether it's mitochondrial dependent or independent. The fourth important compound is quercetin, which is a flavonoid and found in many foods like red wine, onions, green tea. And quercetin also has been shown to inhibit the tumor growth of NSCLC's mice model like A549 and SSC827. And here authors have shown that in SSC827, it mainly inhibits the SRC signaling. As when the author overexpressed the SRC signaling, the inhibition was reduced. Moreover, now people have shown that using nanoparticles, when the conjugates of paclitaxel is used with quercetin, the combined treatment shows a significant effect as compared to the nanoparticle treated conjugated with quercetin or paclitaxel alone. So we have also looked into quercetin, and we found that quercetin can actually inhibit the cancer cell metabolism by impairing the aerobic glycolysis. So we have shown that quercetin inhibit PFK, phosphofructokinase platelet type, LDHA, and thereby reducing the lactate secretion outside the tumor microenvironment, and thereby quercetin inhibits or modulates this cancer metabolism phenotype, thereby inhibiting the migration and chlorogenic potential of cancer cells. So we suggest that combination therapy broadens the therapeutic scope of natural products, as adjuvant treatment of natural products with current regimens could be beneficial in treating the patients of NSCLC. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Any questions?
Yeah,
I just
sir,
want
I
to
have to. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
You have suggested many of these natural products which can help in lung cancer management. But how will you formulate these doses? How will you formulate the doses for the patient?
See, presently we are working with the in vitro and preclinical models. We have not gone to the phase trials, but as I can suggest that, working in medical oncology, of course we can come up with the dosage also. But first we need to ensure that these compound has no side effects and they are actually working efficaciously with the the present chemotherapy or radiotherapy.
Yeah, as far as I understand is that you can always predict the effect, but you can never predict the side effect.
Yeah, but
So,
you know what we are doing in our lab, that we are mainly working with the epithelial cells of normal origin, and we are looking what are the molecular changes they bring out in the normal cells. Of course, we can see that they have a really good effect on cancer cells, but we are also working on the normal cells.
Yeah, I would like to add that this compound is already approved for therapy. It is taken by diabetic patients as well as people with advanced joint pain.
Yes,
Quercetin
yes.
is already approved therapy, so the toxicity angle is not so important.
Yes, even for curcumin, in our onco anesthesia department, they are giving curcumin tablets for the pain.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on to next presenter. And if anybody has any questions, please add to the chat box.
Thank you.
Dr. Chandra, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, see, whatever the molecule, as other panelists also said, since we are trying to, this is a kind of suggestion as question also, right? See, whether it is a berberine, whether it is a allicin, whether it is a curcumin, right? I just want, before you go further, now preclinical, just try these synergetic effect of these molecules. What actually happens when we combine this with a drug? Sometimes what actually happens, we are thinking on one side that drug is giving a synergetic effect with one compound, right? But in our regular habit, we anyhow are using, whether it is a berberine, whether it is a curcumin, whether it is a allicin, we are using that. So the synergetic or whether antagonistic effect among these compounds is very important, right? So this is a kind of
yes, sir. Yeah, thank you for the suggestion, sir. And we are looking directly into it. Just to tell you that recently we have used a combination of curcumin, berberine, and quercetin in TNBC cell line models. We are getting really good effects, but yes, they do affect the normal cells also when we are doing this combination.
That is what I actually want to say.
Yes. So you're right, but one has to take care of these things also. Nice suggestion, and it's a really good question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chandra. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
There is a special announcement that one of the participants, Dr. Parul Johri, will join us again because her question answer round was not clear at that time. So because of some network issues, so she will join again. And dear chairpersons, kindly take her questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We will do.
Sir, okay.
Dr. Ajit Joshi, sir, may I help you for that?
Yes, sir.
If I'm not
Yeah, now I'm
okay.
ready.
Tell
me, if it is visible or not?
Yes, it's visible now. It's visible. Just stick to the full mode.
Okay, because I am unable to see that because if she shared the PPT, then I am unable to see anything.
It's
Okay,
excellently good, sir. You can carry on.
Thank you to all
It's fine,
ordinary
keep
committee
going.
members giving this opportunity. Uh, uh, I am discussing. I am explaining about my topic, which we have discovered few novel methyl isooxazole derivative. After showing that after synthesis, we have analyzed that all the three kind of activity as per the literature against the standard drugs, antibacterial, antifungal, anti-malarial activity, and they are showing the potential activity. And this work is dedicated to my both honorable my mentor, guide, PhD supervisor, Professor G. Talesraji, and my Guru Sri Sri Kadesha Maharaji. Now, recently they passed away in this month only after COVID positive recovery. And the motto only that thing they are tell us me the guide be, please you can do your work for mankind and as well as fulfill the society. So on the basis we have discovered this molecule, and now it is showing the wonderful application. And recently in the last 2020 I found that my molecule is similar to molecule is showing in the Nature publication against the COVID. So and as a because we are the chemists, we are synthesize the molecule, and we have hand over to given to the microbiology of whatever the laboratory they are doing the analysis. But main problem is that we are facing nowadays because we don't have COVID vaccine production large scale, because everyone is facing the world like a pandemic society pandemic. So therefore, I remembering all the parameters because we chemists, so we can think of the technology and condition for synthesize whatever chemical is very easily and cheaply available from the market. We can use for that and develop the condition so that minimize requirement of the minimum energy, as well as we are focusing for that because.
Dr. Ajit sir.
Yeah. Yes, I'm showing that my conclusion, and then I show that what we did work. Okay, so we are preparing this molecule, 6 into the 10 molecule. But reason behind only the because our mental is give suggestion. Please make a such compound we can develop in commercial labor, large scale within a short time, require less energy, and you can develop this technology so that because academic we can do very small scale milligram. That is not nothing but we can do publish, but when we come to in the real practical world, we give the technology transfer to the industry, then we realize something is problem. We are not able to succeed. Whatever publication we have impact factor, high impact factor, but that is not fulfilled for industry, and that is the drawback is there. That's why we have developed these techniques so that we can immediately commercialize. Okay, so that's why I'm focusing for that separation, purification, isolation. They are very critical task, and is a headache and is increasing the cost of that. So this is the in this designing or planning of that this 5-step synthesis. Actually, this is the 4th step in this scheme, but in the 2nd step it is in situ reaction. Okay, so I go to step by step, and we have done with characterize all the spectral techniques, NMR, especially for NMR LCMS. Okay, and purify the all compound after the synthesize the column chromatography and element analysis, and this is the first step compound where that is well known compound. That is, we can say SIP based compound. We are taking the substitute of aryl compound aldehyde with the hydroxylamine hydrochloride in the mole to mole reaction. In the basic condition, we are getting that first our SIP based compound, and which only at the that reaction is at the 0 temperature. If you are planning for the low temperature, then it will take time, maybe some time. So maybe 2 to 4, maybe 10, and maybe sometime 12 hours. But our focusing minimum use of requirement of energy. If you see in my whole scheme, there only we are controlling less than 100-degree temperature only, not more than that. Okay, therefore we have discovered a solvent system and anything, and all data is there, and is for monitoring as well as purification by 30%, ethylation and hexane, and all data is there. The second, this is the in situ reaction, where for this is the we are now here I'm showing this 2-step. Okay, but this is the we get the isoxyl compound in ester form. So first we are doing the chlorination and chlorosuccination niacinamide, so that H should be replaced by the chlorine, and then this compound become as a 3+2 a condensation cyclization reaction. Okay, so that we get the isoxyl ester derivative, and this is the compound liquid, and this is also, you can see, that is a room temperature reaction, 0 degree temperature. After that, we are holding for the room temperature for 12 hours, and we get the pure colorless liquid compound, and confirmed by the NMR also. That after getting the ester, we are just going to hydrolysis to make acid. See, now this is the isoxyl carboxyl compound. Now it is showing the nature. It is the against coronavirus. This is now generally the application is there. Wonderful application. But we are before that we are filing the 19th patent, because now as per the result we are think that is a very wonderful applications for the society human being. So on the basis we have filed. But now we realize that is how wonderful applications nowadays also. Here we are using the 3 solvent system: THF, methanol, ethanol, water in 1:1 ratio, so that we get easily from liquid to solid compound. We can get high yield, okay, and that is the only 70 degree temperature, not more than that. Okay, so that I focusing on that all parameters for commercialization if you want to commercialize the product. So that's why we are thinking and for separation isolation. So this parameter is there, and it is a fast last derivative we have prepared the 10 derivative with the help of coupling. There is a
Excuse me, yeah? Dr. Joshi, can you conclude? It's already like, I think.
Just last 2 minutes only, sir. Sorry for delay because I'm unable to share that PPT. Okay, so that is the last coupling reaction. It is a well-known reagent of the coupling peptide reagent. Here we get acid to amide, and that 10 compound is the picture. These are the table physical data. That is the pictures of all the derivative compound, which showing the potential activity, and these are the all data: NMR, LCMS, purity, everything is there. Okay, and now we after that synthesize, we are sending the applications for this 3 activity: antibacterial, antifungal, antimalarial. So we realize in the various fungi, stain, pathogens with respect to standard, we realize that this compound is showing 3 potential activity. That's why we're putting the symbol of the Trishul of Bholenath. Okay, because they are showing 3. But now I realize after the skinning the molecule of this skeleton, now very soon I will change this Trishul to the Sudarshan Chakra, because now it is showing a wonderful application not only for this. So I can say that my molecule become as a we can say Sanjeevani booty for not only for a single medicine, but is the multiple purpose. So very soon we have that compound in form of that Sudarshan Chakra. And these are all the activity MIC level in vitro synthesis. And this conclusion already I told because my mentor say you can make them fruitful for main. We can say cheaply available. So we can design from technology point of view as a human being point of view. And that's why I filed the patent, and now is very soon we get this award also. And I thanks to my Mewar University, which they are having the last 7 years and holding the department, and now working in the Ukata University in the Bardoli, Gujarat. So for the, thanks for all. And this is my team, my mentor, guide, and my senior Professor Pillai sir, ex-AG chairman, and my guy mentor is there, and various professor examiner coming to during my PhD. So thanks to all from my side is ending to.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi.
May I audible? Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. From Dr. Joshi, I think he has told about these impact of these molecules, biomolecules, and it has anti-protozoal, antibacterial, and antifungal activity. We can think to find out its antiviral properties also. So people can think about it, and we can work.
Yes, sir.
Work
That's why I.
So are there some?
Definitely.
Are there
yes,
some
sir. I told
as an antiviral properties?
Because we have sent to sample for the labs, and they will that and give result. Now I am showing I get more information about the molecular scanning. So now it's that's why I say my molecule is showing like a Sudarshan Chakra is a multiple application, not only for 3-4. It's going to multiple application, also cancer also. So, but it will take time to synthesize and further going step by step evolution.
Dr. Joshi,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Joshi, hold on. This is Dr. Sandeep Sharma.
Yeah.
You know how much time will take for a drug molecule from clinical trial to reach to a drug? Do you have some idea?
Yes, sir. I know that is earlier time we can take them maybe 30, 40 years. But now recently you see that coronavirus, we are getting within 1 year. If you are qualified to work, then we have to successfully within 1 year.
Still, Dr. Joshi, you just check the activity. Still, we are not sure whether your molecule is toxic or giving some kind of activity, accepted activity, lot of parameters. Even you just find a MIC, I agree that it's showing activity, that's fine. But it's like too early to say, something, what actually, I encourage you that you are like too positive about your molecule, but I think it's too early to say all these things. But anyways,
you are right, sir, because the file after that is COVID situation, so we are unable to do anything. And meanwhile, we are lose the compound because that in the lab, the eating by the mouse. So that is the drawback is we have to require again start from the beginning. So it will take time to send to sample toxicity. But
I mean, it looks to me is that you are committing too early too much. Therapeutics, experts.
Sir, it is my confidence. Yeah, I am sure, sir, because I have confidence. I have confidence for industrial as well research from last 25 years. That's why I'm on the basis I am saying it is maybe very soon, maybe 3-4, depending on the final support. So we will. I can prove it. That is in the recording. Everything is recording that conference. Okay, I will show that very soon. That is my molecule is a wonderful application near future.
Good luck then. Good luck.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. If you have any question.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi. I think, are there some questions, any queries from the audience?
Yes, sir, we have a question. As Dr. Ajit Joshi sir has said that it has an antifungal and anti-malarial activity against STD drugs. So can you just give us some insights over nanoparticles? What are the advanced aspects we can search out for the nanoparticles or nano drug delivery system in this particular presentation? What you have told about.
Thank you, sir. Nice question, but actually we are not focusing 8% in the nano. Our focus for that first synthesis molecule and in scanning and the various activity which is available. Then if they are showing positive, then we will also meanwhile try to collaborate them so they can study at the nano level also. So that become as a for what you want.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So, Dr. Bharadwaj, sir.
Yes, sir.
We have Dr. Parul Johri again. We know that her question answer round was not yet done. So, Dr. Parul Johri, are you there?
Dr. Parul Johri is there?
Yes, he's. Her name is showing in the presenter
Sir,
list.
can I leave that?
Yes, sir. You can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Parul Johri, ma'am.
Yes, am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
You're audible.
Actually, I just connected from my mobile. Somewhere it was not getting connected through my laptop.
No issues, ma'am. So we have certain questions from Muktikant Rai sir and Dr. Bharadwaj sir. Sir, please continue.
Yeah. What I want to know that carbon, whatever percentage you have trying to differentiate, is a very narrow range, 0.1 range. So what is the sensitivity level of testing which you have in your lab?
Sir, in wet lab, we haven't done anything. We are just doing with the dry lab, the sequences which are available, because this type of work has never been reported. So we are just checking. First, what we did was we created a hydropathy plot and a carbon content plot. Now, because the hydropathy plot and the carbon content plot was, the Chi-2 carbon content hydropathy plot was just overlying the hydropathy plot. So we confirmed that hydropathy is just because of the carbon in a particular amino acid. So right now we are just doing in silico analysis. We are trying trying to cluster the proteins on the basis of their secondary structure, on the basis of the glycosylation linked with the carbon content. Later on, once this is being done, we will try to prove it in the wet lab.
But in this in silico analysis, are you trying to find out what is the ratio of oxygen to carbon or your sulfur to?
Definitely, sir.
Okay.
Next step is to analyze the remaining 4 atoms also. But because the percentage of oxygen is very low, it's only mainly the carbon, the backbone, and mainly the carbon content. Carbon atom is the main constituent. So we were initially focusing on the carbon, and we were also trying to correlate this viral infections with the carbon content. That initially the nature of the proteins in humans was more of hydrophilic, and it was gradually getting converted to hydrophobic, and now it is getting reversed. Now again we are going to hydrophilic, more of hydrophilic amino acids. So we are just correlating all these things. We are also trying to get a stereographic type of equation for all the atoms, and then we will link to the type of the protein. That if this
Here
is the equation,
I'm very curious. Now, since you say it's in silico analysis, I'm very curious to know, because most of the proteins now they have a hydrophobic core and a hydrophilic core. So when you are able to compare the core, will there be a change in this carbon proportion?
Definitely, sir, because as of now we are focusing on the entire protein sequences. So we are doing a very generalized content analysis for all the model organism, for all the virulent proteins, for all the secondary structure proteins. But later on, definitely we'll be trying to focus it and fix it to the hydrophobic core and the hydrophilic cores also, and also the active site of the proteins where actually the drug may go and bind. We would like to demark the carbon content of the site which will act as an active site if the carbon content is this much. So a lot of group, yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Johari.
Thank you, sir.
I think now can we call next speaker, Dr. Luke Bahadur Shatri?
Yes, sir.
So,
am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. You are most welcome. You can start your presentation.
Yes, I'll share.
Hello.
Yes, sir. I'm sharing, sir.
Sir, my presentation is there. Now I'm going to share my screen right now. Hello.
Yes. Is it visible? My presentation is visible? Hello.
Okay.
Yes, your presentation is visible, sir.
Hello.
Now,
Yes,
Dr.
your presentation is visible.
So thank you so.
Dr. Kshatriya is calling. I
Thank
think.
you so much. My top.
Just make it to the
Yes,
harmful
sir.
mode.
Sir,
Yes, you are good.
so my topic is effects of Osimum sanctum plant extract on prostate enlargement. So I briefly highlight the introduction, background, and directly go to the result section. So this is the prostate enlargement or BPH is a common urological disorder of aging males. It is caused by due to uncontrolled proliferation of stromal and epithelial cells in the prostate gland. So and this there are several conventional drugs which reduce the BPH, benign prostate hyperplasia or prostate enlargement, likely the finasteride,
Your
dutasteride.
are not moving. You please share the entire screen and then go to presentation mode.
Sir, is it visible?
No. First,
Hello?
go to the full screen as suggested.
Full screen. Take it to the full screen.
Sir, I may made it full screen, sir.
No, what you do, you stop sharing now, again reshare, and when you share, go for opt for full screen, and then you go to presentation mode.
Oh. Okay, sir. Sure. Oh. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Sir, please
Hello?
again share your screen.
Hello.
Yes, yes, your screen is visible.
Is
Yes,
it visible?
absolutely
Now it's
visible.
good. Now it's working.
Okay, sir.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes,
Okay,
yes,
sir.
good to
Thank
go.
you, sir.
Okay, fine.
Okay, sir. Okay. To read for the there are several conventional drugs to reduce the benign prostate hyperplasia, likely finasteride and dutasteride, but these drugs has a adverse side effect. So in this context, the phytotherapeutic and plant origin the drugs proven a effective treatment for the management of BPH. So regarding this, the osmium sanctum has in urological disorder, and many places it is used anti-fertility. So by taking this information into account, the present study was designed to investigate the effectiveness of aqueous leaf extract of osmium sanctum in BPH rat model. So this is my experimental design divided into negative control, and the BPH model is induced by the exogenous injection of testosterone treatment for 7 days, and for 4 groups, the positive control which received only testosterone 10 mg per day, and the finasteride group plus finasteride, and third group received finasteride plus testosterone, and fourth received the osmium sanctum testosterone, and fifth received the 500 mg of osmium sanctum plus testosterone. And on the day of 21, the animals are sacrificed and data was analyzed. So this is the result. The testosterone treated group significantly increased the body weight, age, prostate weight, and prostatic index also. But at the same time, the reduce the body weight, this parameter, prostatic index, and the plant extract treated groups dose dependently reduce the body weight as well as the prostate weights and the prostatic index, and the percentage of inhibition. So the 64.2% of the maximum dose of osmium sanctum. So this is the histopathology structure. The testosterone treated enlargement by enlargement with increasing acinar folding when compared to negative control, and this C is a finasteride treated group which reduce the prostate enlargement as well as the prostate epithelial heights, and these are the plant extract treated groups. The plant extract treated groups 500 as well as 100 as well as 500 treated groups shows the maximum reduction of epithelial height when compared to the positive control group. So we also tested the toxicity of this plant extract. We did in liver histopathology as well as the it was found in the serum marker of liver injury at any group during the experimental period. So interperitoneal conclusion, interperitoneal administration of this aqueous leaf extract 100 and 500 mg osmium sanctum significantly reduced the increased prostate size and prostatic index. So the plant significantly inhibit the prostate epithelial height, thus decrease the prostate hyperplasia in testosterone treated group. Histopathological examination and the serum ALT of liver also confirmed the plant had no adverse effect on liver at selected dose. So together, this finding indicate the osmium sanctum effectively inhibit the development of BPH in rat model. Further research will be needed to understand the exact molecular pathway rendered by the plant extract. So thank you so much, sir. This is my preliminary work. Hello.
Thank you,
Hello.
sir. Thank you. Yes, listening.
Okay,
Thank
sir.
you very much, sir. It's a very nice presentation,
Yes, sir.
and it's a novel work, your preliminary work, so you have done good efforts. Any questions? It's open for queries and questions. we all are using Ocimum sanctum, and he has tried to find out the effect of Ocimum sanctum on testosterone and against prostate enlargement. So you can ask anyone, queries from audience.
I have one query. If you
Yes, sir.
want to formulate this into an form of
Ye-
for drug purpose, so will it be
Yes,
injectable
sir.
or oral route?
Sir?
Whatever test you have done, it is on cell line, right? On animals, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It
so
is
what
in
was
vivo,
the route
sir,
of
only.
administration? What was the route of administration?
Its route of administration is, sir, intramuscular, sir.
Intramuscular.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. I think
Thank you, sir.
now we can call next speaker, Dr. Suhas. Is Dr. Suhas listening?
Yes, sir. Can you listen to me?
Yes, we can listen, and your presentation is visible. As suggested, I think you should choose, yes, full presentation. Okay. It's visible,
Okay.
sir. Thank you. You
Okay.
can start.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be talking about the synthesis of some tryptophan-containing peptides as potential analgesic and anti-inflammatory agents. The main thing is we all know that microorganisms, they have developed resistance, and we have to beat these current prescriptions. And the challenges before is to develop the new drugs or modify the existing ones. In this context, the main question that comes to our mind is, do we need new drugs or the existing one will do? Definitely we want the new drugs. And we are the research group mainly working on amino acids and peptides, because these amino acids or peptide based drugs have found applications in oncology, gastrointestinal, neurotransmitters, and cardiovascular diseases. One of the main things that we are working on is the inflammation, and this inflammation has got numerous problems, and these are the problems that we have shown here, and we are trying to develop some molecules to fight against this inflammation. Inflammation can be good or bad, and sometimes it is progressive healing, but sometimes it is progressive destruction. In order to combat this, there are two types of steroidal and anti-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Whereas the steroidal, as the name itself indicates, it has got some serious side effects, whereas non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs have got some advantages, but at the same time it has got some disadvantages also, because they are blood thinners, they alter the blood pressure, and also it causes stomach and cause bleeding. Apart from that, it causes a lot of other problems also. And in this context, we are mainly interested with the heterocyclic class of compounds, especially the nitrogen containing heterocycles and particularly indoles. And these indoles are present in the marketed drugs. They are called indomethacin, ethodolac, and tenidap. They contain indole, and these possess wide spectrum of biological activities. Because we are the research group working with peptides and amino acids, this indole is exemplified by the amino acid tryptophan. So the main basis of our design is to keep the amino acid tryptophan at the C terminal. That means this will be common in all our peptides, and varying different amino acids or peptides at the N terminal. We have changed different amino acids and also peptides. The amino acids includes basic amino acids, acidic amino acids, as well as the peptides ranging from tripeptide and also pentapeptide. And also we have used the tetrapeptide. Not only the peptides or the amino acid side chains were changed, but also the protecting groups. Here, instead of FMOP, we have replaced that with BOC, Z, or no substitution. This is the design. And now we are talking about the synthesis. The synthesis was mainly done by solution phase peptide synthesis by 3+2 fragment coupling approach, wherein these two dipeptides were synthesized differently, and these three dipeptides were synthesized differently, and they were coupled using EDCI HOBT method. Finally, the peptides were debulked by TFA, and the C-terminal protecting group, that is benzyloxy-carbonyl, was saponified to give the final peptides. This is the synthesis. Amino acid tryptophan was esterified, and following that by coupling with different amino acids or peptides, leading to the final compounds. The synthesized compounds are subjected to anti-inflammatory and analgesic activity, so also the ulcerogenic activity. That compounds having FMOC, that is bulky group N-terminal substitution, helped in improving the anti-inflammatory activity compared to Z, and Z having superior activity compared to BOC. We can say that as the bulkiness increases, the activity also increases. When between acids of basic and acidic, we have seen that basic amino acids, presence of basic amino acids, they help in improving the activity compared to acidic amino acids. Further, the length of the peptides also played a very important role in giving the activity. This is a simple dipeptide, and this is tetrapeptide, and this is pentapeptide conjugated to tryptophan. This is tripeptide conjugated to tryptophan. I'm sorry, this is pentapeptide conjugated to tryptophan. That means it becomes hexapeptide. This is tetrapeptide, and this is dipeptide. Among the three peptides, hexapeptide showed more activity, thus suggesting that as the length of the peptide increases, activity also increases. Next, coming to the dose and time. We carried out the different doses, 25 mg, 50 mg, and 100 mg. As the dose increased, activity also increased. So also the time. Here we can see that the maximum activity was seen at 3 hours, and after that the activity started slowly degrading. So the activity is dose as well as time dependent. More importantly, the peptides were less ulcerogenic, as it did not cause any pores in the stomach after dissection. This is the diagram showing analgesic activity. The compounds were administered orally, and this is very important to be noted. The peptides were orally active, and it was done by tail flick method. And this is anti-inflammatory activity by carrageenan-induced Rad-Paul-Edema method. Here also the compounds were given orally, and the carrageenan was induced. It is an inflammatory agent, and we can see that there will be an increase in the inflammatory responses. This paw is swollen. Now, after giving the drug, we can see that we can measure the reduction in the paw edema by vernier calipers, and we can see that the swollen, the swelling is drastically reduced in this case. And that's why we can claim that our compounds are best ulcerogenic and anti-inflammatory agents with very, very less ulcerogenicity. This is all my presentation. Thank you very much.
It was a nice presentation. I just wanted to ask, when you were doing the animal experiment, did you approach the Animal Ethics Committee?
Yes, sir. We took the permission from our university Animal Ethical Committee, and after having processed only, we will get the animals. Otherwise, we won't get the animals.
I just wanted to know prior they giving permission, what was the preliminary data you shared with them?
We have to share the entire procedural aspects, right from the project proposal up to how many rats that we are going to use. Everything we have to submit to them in the form of DPR, that is detailed project report.
And you did have any cell line experiments you have not done?
Sir, not yet, sir. Not yet.
Yeah, that is the very good question, sir. Actually, this is Dr. Sandeep. How you shifted directly to the animal studies rather than doing any kind of in vitro and all those things? I mean, it's a really surprise how they permit you, like, just without getting any kind of in vitro data.
Because these are peptides and they are not so harmful. And these anti-inflammatory or analgesic, we mainly do it in the animals only, because these are the methods, carrageenan Rad-Paul induced and tail flicking method. We do mainly in the animals itself. And the next course of action will be, once they show less ulcerogenicity, then we are going to do the histopathology studies.
Yeah, but it looks, that you are not follow actually the basic principle of drug discovery. It looks to me like that way. because in vitro data is very important. Until unless you just take the cell lines, get the activity done, some kind of activity, whether what kind of cytotoxicity, what kind of activity is there, then I think it's a valid point, but I mean, it's up to you. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will follow this, sir.
Exactly. After you discover that the drug is acting, but it is a large cytotoxic effect, and there is no use in your research.
Hello.
Sir?
Question? Anyways, okay. Nothing.
I think, thank you, Dr. Suhas, and good suggestions from Dr. Sandeep Singh and Mukti Rezi, and we are also in the same opinion that first of all we should go through the in vitro studies, taking direct animals model studies. Thank you very much. Any more questions or queries? Thank you, Dr. Saha. I think now we call Dr. Raj Pratap Kshatriya ji.
Yes, sir. I'm going to. Yes, I'm going to share my screen. Hello.
Yes, you can start, sir.
One minute, sir.
Sir, if you need any help, please tell.
Sir, my screen is visible to you?
No, right now
Not yet.
we can't.
Not yet.
Yes. Now just go to the presentation. Click on the presentation. Just click on the presentation.
Sir, after share screen, I have to click on the share screen, but
just no, sir. Just go to the share screen option. Once the orange color button is showing, just go to the PPT. Just click on your PPT. That will be okay.
Sir, can I help you? Sir, just when you share a screen, then you have window. We have three options. That second window.
Yes. Now
is it
just
visible?
open your PPT. Yes, you can open
Is
your
it
PPT,
visible?
sir.
Yes, I have opened. Is it visible?
Yes, visible, sir.
Yes, sir.
Visible. Okay. Okay. So my topic is recent advancement in the development of bioactive respiratory drugs and COVID-19. Myself, Dr. Raj Pratap
First open your
Kshatriya.
PPT. First you open PPT.
Sir, first open
okay.
your PPT, sir. Your PPT is not open yet.
I have opened my PPT, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Just click,
Again, go
click
to
here.
share slide.
Your screen is
Just
visible
open the
only.
share slide and then middle one window.
Share your whole
Middle
screen.
one, click on the window.
Yes. First, share screen, then window, then this.
You can click window.
Is it visible now?
Yes,
open.
visible.
Control F
Is it
again.
visible?
Control
Move
5.
to the full screen mode.
F5.
Okay. So this is my short introduction. I'm from Department of Chemistry, Qatar University. I have completed my PhD and postdoc from Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. I have two companies. We are working Kshatriya Product Portal and Life Care. We are commercializing the drugs, fine chemicals, and the distributors in Gujarat and Maharashtra area. So this is my company, and next thing is we are about what is the respiratory diseases, and all the things I have mentioned here related to the respiratory systems that diseases are called as respiratory diseases. These respiratory diseases are generally classified into two types. One is the pulmonary infections, and the second is the chronic lung diseases. And currently I am preparing for the pulmonary infection. Pulmonary infections are due to the next the bioactive terpenoids. There are 3 to 4 types of bioactive molecules which are found as a secondary metabolites in the plants. And I have taken the survey of the molecules and some of the bioactive terpenoid molecules. If you see it carefully, then these molecules are synthesized by the mevalonic acid pathway in the plant, C5, C10, and C units. And if you carefully observe that these all molecules are chiral. So these all molecules are chiral, and our main area of research is chiral development of methodologies, asymmetric methodologies for the synthesis of these chiral drugs. So next is the bioactive flavonoids. If you see, these are the flavonoid units, and these flavonoid units has a special functions like COO. This is the skeleton is present in each of the flavonoid molecules. You find some of the sugar molecule is there, and these moieties are there. Okay, next is the bioactive terpenoids, humans, then flavonoids. After flavonoids, these are some of the bioactive natural products other than these categories, that terpenoids and flavonoids. These are something different mycelineous molecules which are used as used for respiratory system. Now, if you do the drug molecules here, from up to the date, there are 326 drug molecules, antiviral drugs, 138 antiviral.
Instead of the background, please show us the data. What kind of testing you have done with these compounds? We are not interested in.
Okay. These are some of the drug molecules. Okay. So based on this skeleton, we are planned to synthesize the molecules based on these to inhibit the RNA dependent RNA polymerase, which is the important enzyme for the replication of these molecules. These are the some of the drug molecules which we are planned to synthesize in our lab by proper modification, and out of that we have selected this remdesivir molecule. The remdesivir is a chiral drugs, and we have developed the protocols in our laboratory at Tri-City Mumbai during my postdoctoral work. I have developed the protocols, and these are the catalyst. If you see, this is the R-binyl based catalyst for the enantioselective selective synthesis of the chiral drug like remdesivir, because with the currently we are not able to find out completely new drugs. So government of India has told us that to repurpose the existing drugs and to scale up that drug. So we plan to scale up the existing drugs like remdesivir and other remdesivir and its analogs. So this is the protocol for this is the chiral catalyst. Here you are seeing these are the number of 8 to 9 step products we have developed in our laboratory. This is the chiral catalyst which would be used for the development of the remdesivir. So these are the some synthetic steps we have developed this catalyst by. These are the reagents and conditions during my 3 years postdoctoral work. I have developed these are some of the catalyst for the chiral drugs. So next is this is the remdesivir molecules. Remdesivir molecule which is used for the this is the repurposing. It is used for initially for the other antiviral infections, but right now it is used for the it is effective against the COVID-19 also. So what our purpose is to scale up this drug molecule on one side and to commercialize at a low cost, and other plan is to make its derivatives and screening. So where we reach, we have synthesized the chiral catalyst, and we are going to apply that protocol for the synthesis of the remdesivir drug molecule. If you see, you have you clearly this yellow color, blue color is the intermediate for the synthesis of the remdesivir, and the previous protocol is here. By using this previous protocol, we get a distereomeric mixture of the remdesivir. So both of the isomers are there. So we don't know which isomers. People are not enantioselectively selected one drug molecule. Initially, the racemic mixture is using. So we plan to enantioselectively synthesize only one enantiomer, which will be more active. We know that out of the 2 enantiomers, one will be the more active. So this drug chiral phosphoric acid we have developed, which I show you in the previous slides. This catalyst is developed, and we are planned to apply this chiral phosphoric acid for the distereoselective synthesis of this remdesivir molecule. So how is it possible? You see, this is the phosphorus and chlorine molecule, and this NH. acts as a branched acid, and it attaches with this molecule via hydrogen bonding, and we get a anisomeric access of this molecule. Now, newly designed analogs. So we have designed these new analog molecules for the synthesis of the remdesivir molecules, and their synthesis is under screening. We have collaborated for the biological activity and for the docking related work with some other groups. Our main area of work is to develop this COVID-19, to develop analogs, and these 4 analogs suggested to us by our collaborator to synthesis, and for the synthesis of these drug molecules are under process.
Yeah,
So,
while it would have been better if you had shared that data, but what is your plan to test against COVID-19 with these molecules?
Yeah. Already these are what the government of India. These are already FDA approved. So there is no need to do much screening. But at least for the COVID-19, we thought that
these are
will be.
These are FDA approved, but are they generic? Are you allowed to make these molecules yourself?
Yeah. We have developed a protocol.
No, you have developed a protocol, but are you allowed legally to develop this molecule, which is already under patent laws?
We are the existing drugs. We are making modification in that drugs. Also, see.
So then the modified drug is not FDA approved. You have to do the testing again.
Yeah, you are right. You are absolutely right that we have to do the biological testing again. We are going to plan the human cells and then the animal model, and then we have to follow all the clinical trials again. But what the people, these drugs are already tested.
Dr. Kshatriya, please conclude. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please conclude. Yeah.
So I thanks to my Dr. Pali Govender, Professor Trisha Maikar, Dr. Satyajit Shah, my colleague from CBR, Dr. Dilip Tiwari, Professor Tange John, who is my collaborator for NIH anti-cancer activity. We are collaborated with him. Some of the drug molecules we have tested for anti-cancer from ACTREC Mumbai. We are collaborated with them. Dr. Sandeep Chaudhary from IIT Jaipur, Rajasthan. These are people which are in contact with me and some of my postdocs. So our main area is to develop a chiral methodologies for the drugs in collaboration with the other people. Mainly we are a synthetic people, synthetic chemists. So that things we are strong enough, and we are in collaboration with the other biological department and the docking department. We are doing the rest of the work.
Very nice synthesis doing. In case you want to test one biologically active compound in a in a biological model, so what biological model will you choose?
What the biological model we will not choose, because we are just sending the molecule to the screening department. We are just synthesizing the molecules in collaboration with the docking people. They suggest the molecule. We are just synthesizing the molecules and then send to the biological screening department.
Yeah, I want to know.
Our main role is to synthesize the drug molecule.
No, I understand what you're saying, but in future, what kind of biological screening will your screening collaborators suggest?
What screening means? Screening means for the COVID-19, we planned this to screen for the COVID-19. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Whatever the docking people, we are in collaboration with the docking people. We discuss with them. They screen this molecule, see the interactions and these things with the standard drug molecule, and on the basis of the interactions, so many things are there: protein interactions, ligand protein interaction, and they will suggest us this will be the most probable molecule. You just synthesize. Our role is to synthesize
Okay. Done. It's done. Thank you very much. Done. Sir, next candidate.
Thank you, sir. I think Dr. Kshatriya was the last candidate.
Dr. Raj Pratap is the last. Yes, Dr. Bhardwaj. Raj Pratap is the last candidate.
Yes, he is the last candidate, and in this
Now
best,
we can conclude the session.
yes, in the best innovative research award, there were 6 presenters, and for this oral presentation, Dr. Parul Johri from MIT University has discussed about the carbon content analysis of virulent proteins against SARS coronavirus 2. And they have analyzed protein sequences into atoms and calculated the carbon percentage of spike proteins as well, and they have found the nature, virulence, and range of carbon
As per the list, there is a seventh one.
Sorry.
As per the list, there is a seventh presentation. He is not presenting.
Yes, sir. Seventh,
Yes.
he is not present. He is not
He is not
present.
presenting. Okay.
Only 6 presenter, and our next presenter was Dr. Chandra Prakash Prasad from AIIMS, and he has worked on natural compounds for the therapeutic management of lung cancer. He has discussed about various natural compounds that can be used against lung cancer and response to the apoptosis. He has also told about the combination therapy. After that, the next speaker was Dr. Ajit Joshi from the Department of Chemistry, Melbourne University, Gujarat. He has discussed about a novel molecule, 5-methyloxazole, having antimicrobial activity, and discuss about the STD disease, how these molecules they work in the system and can use be as drug. And I think he has patented one. He's applied for patent also. After that, Dr. Luke Bahadur from Assam, he has discussed about the effect of Osimum sanctum extract of this plant against the prostate enlargement. Then Dr. Suhas from the Department of Chemistry has discussed about some the tryptophan containing proteins, and he has showed that these have the analgesic and anti-inflammatory agent. In the last, Dr. Raj Pratap Kshatriya has worked very nicely. His presentation was good, and he has described about the advancement and in the development of some bioactive respiratory drugs and COVID-19. And as Dr. Sabha has asked that how these about the remdesivir and these molecules and some protocols have been developed by him. So thank you very much to the all. These were the overall presentation of all the 6 members. Thank you once again to the all presenters. Thank you, sir. Should we, Sharmaji, should we end the session?
Yeah, Dr. Bharadwaj.
Yes. Are you listening? So this innovative research award presentation is now coming to end, and I think we should end the meeting for today. Should we close?
Dr. Divakar sir?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. Today we will finish, and tomorrow I think we will start at the time, and we will collect ourselves at 4 o'clock, sharp at 4 o'clock. We will start tomorrow, and at 4 o'clock, first of all, some introduction by chairpersons. After that, 5 minutes, session 1 will be start, and there will be keynote speakers, Professor T.S. Pillai, and after that, invited lectures by Neeladri Rai and Dr. Yash Gupta, Dr. Meera Mullah, invited lecture Professor Kamlesh Choreji, and invited talk Dr. Krishnan Anand. And this will finish the first session about 6 o'clock. Then there will be tea break as the schedule is given, and at 6 o'clock session 2 will start with the lecture of Dr. Aditi Singh, then Dr. Raghavendra, Dr. Rajiv Mishra. So these will be 3 speakers in session 2, and the most important session will be session 3, in which there will be presentation of the oral presentation for research award. Today it was the innovative research award, and tomorrow the research scholar award session will start at 7 o'clock. The Miss Shreya, Saurabh Singh, Mrs. Jyoti Gautam, Mr. Vinayak, Mr. Sarvesh Kumar, Mr. Piyush Kant Rai, and Pradeep Mansure, these will be the speakers. And this session, second session, third session will finish at about 7:50. Then the last session, this will be the oral presentation for PG award category. As you know that we have 3 award category: PG award category, research award category, and innovation award category. So in PG award category, till now there are some participants: Ms. Kumari Durga, Vaishali Vishwakarma, Shobhit Gupta, Isha Deshpande, Ankush Rajput, Abhishek Nandi, Aradhana Patel, and Ms. Bhavana Paru. After that, from Germany, Dr. Ulrich Beck, he will have an invited talk. It's an excellent talk on Agnihotra. Then at 9:15, there will be announcement of the awards, and after that, Honorable Professor Chutrugun, he will have some special announcements and vote of thanks. That will be the total program for tomorrow. So till then, good night. Thank you very much.